with letter sound knowledge and alphabetics, followed by phonemic awareness. And obviously these things don't happen in sequential order, but over time. Phonics is a piece of it, developing students' fluency across the grades, building vocabulary, which is an important precursor to students' ability to learn and comprehend, and then obviously that final skill throughout all of our grades, which we want students to partake in, which is comprehension skills. So it would focus on all of them. To Mr. Mancusi's point, it is structured in a scope and sequence so that skills build upon each other in the way that they are intended to. We do know that there's some kids that don't necessarily need it, but all kids benefit from it in the end, and you really can't pick out the ones who will or won't need it, when they come to us. So it's always best to give that treatment to students in that explicit manner that Mr. Mancusi spoke about.
So skills-based in that if a child does not master that
Sorry,
skill,
you're on mute.
Nope.
Nope.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So skills-based in that if a child doesn't master a skill, you'll continue to work on it rather than move on.
Yeah, so the good instructional practices would continue. Obviously, if students fall behind on particular skills, whether they just need differentiation in tier 1 or possibly tier 2, tier 3, or obviously the specific stuff that happens in special education with specialized instruction would happen as well until students master their goals and objectives in that area.
So I'm not sure if my question is to you or to Mr. Mancusi, but the 7 students that are being recommended for the program, are they all in first grade? Are they all in the same, instead of like just first grade, is it skills assessed at this moment? Or is it across grades? Like
it would be grades K, 1, 2, and 3 would be the grades that we're looking at for the most at-risk students right now.
And all students would be of the diagnosis dyslexia?
Yes, initially, yes.
Okay.
The idea is that we want to be able to start in district building our capacity to service students that may currently be unilaterally placed or maybe PPT placed at approved private special ed programs that specialize in reading. It really is an area of need.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
Rob, is that only dyslexia, or does it also include specific learning disabilities?
Right now, we're beginning with dyslexic students, the SLD dyslexia.
Too bad.
Ms. Pitko, are you done with questions? All right, Ms. Maxicanelli, followed by Ms. Jacobson.
Thank you. So a few quick follow-ups. First of all, if you could speak to if money weren't an issue, how many students would you be looking to service, just so that we can put these in relation, this request for 7 in relation to what the need is?
Well, what I would say to that in terms of the amount of unilateral placements and PPT placements we have for students with specific reading disabilities or dyslexia, it's 16 or 17 students. It might even be 18 at this point. So, but in discussing and considering starting something new, in consultation with our consultant, we thought it was best to start with one class. 7 students we thought was a manageable number to begin, and then to expand from there.
Oh no, it's just so I can be clear, I support this. I think to get buy-in, we have to show that we can do the job. So I'm not arguing with it. I just want to make the point for the public and future boards that the need is far greater even than just this 7.
Yes.
But the 16 or 17 that you reference, are those dyslexic only, or is that a broader pool?
Most of them are dyslexic. I'd have to go back and look at their IEPs. I appreciate Mrs. Ratelli's question for asking for whether they could just be SLD versus SLD dyslexia. And, you know, as this hopefully grows and expands, it won't just be for those 7 dyslexic students. It was thought right now to start with our 7 most at-risk readers who currently qualify for special education under SLD dyslexia, and then expand from there.
And these 7 learners, are they currently outplaced, whether unilaterally or PPT? So in other words, are these 7 that we are, by virtue of this enhancement, bringing back to the district, or are they currently in our buildings?
They're currently in our buildings we're looking at. So it would be a potential cost avoidance now and over time. We will continue, as we always do, to try to return students back to the public schools. But this right now is more focused on the students that we currently have in Fairfield Public Schools.
And I get from the student perspective in terms of being disruptive, but why is it that we selected to not bring students back and target that as opposed to the ones in our buildings?
I will tell you, we're not excluding the possibility of students who we can return. We're not excluding the possibility of bringing kids back. It's just the major focus right now of this is to keep kids from leaving the public school. But that does not exclude the possibility that there may be some potential students who we may return to the Early Literacy Academy.
Okay, and then just my last question, and I know that I'm trying to read the document while you're talking, which is always a bad idea. Could you then just lay out simply what are the financial numbers associated, not the costs, which we have detailed for us, but the savings, or maybe perhaps both together?
Well, if we're talking about 7 students, and you're talking about an average annual tuition of just the Southport school is about $61,000. A school, like an approved private school, depending on where. Right now, we have 4 students at a particular placement, which is about $60,000 a year plus tuition. We're looking here at $76,000 to for the literacy coach and to run the 2 30-hour courses with our staff, and then 2 paras, which we would train in structured literacy, and a special ed teacher.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Jacobson, followed by
had
Ms. Guernsey.
Sorry, I had exactly the same 2 questions. So I'll just ask follow-ups to Mrs. Maxon Kennelly's. Mr. Mancusi, Jennifer Maxon Kennelly asked you about the total pool, and that pool is currently in district students. I'd like to know what the total pool is, including those are currently outplaced. This gives us an idea of baseline going forward on hopes of when we have greater capacity to serve this population. So do you have an idea right now? And if you don't, that's fine. Like just a follow-up perhaps of what the actual total pool is.
In terms of total number of in-district dyslexic students and total number of outplaced or unilaterally placed dyslexic students?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd have to get that to you by next week.
No problem. I
Before
just think
next
that's
week.
important to understand as we look to build the capacity, what we're actually looking at here. And then, so yes, I had the same cost avoidance question. So just also follow up is if we can actually do the variance between what this will cost to what the outplacements are. So I know in the questions you put what the total would be for outplacement, but just, I think it's just going forward through the budget process. It'll probably be important to know what that actual variance it looks like. That was it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Kristen. Just on that ELA.
Okay. Ms. Guernsey?
Hi, just a quick question about the structured literacy courses, the second part of this. Are these 2 different literacy courses, or is it the same course that's being offered twice? Is it one pool of teachers? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, it's the same course offered to 2 cohorts of teachers.
Okay, and would you be able to just speak to the timeline of that? Is this something
The timeline of the course, the 2 courses would take place from September to June. Each course, you'd split the year, it would take about 5 months to do.
Okay, thank you.
Because there's coursework, and then there's follow-up, and then there's return to coursework, and then there's follow-up and so forth.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? And my view of you guys is somewhat limited. So if I don't call on you and you have your hand up, just jump in.
Christine,
Yep.
it's Trisha.
Go ahead, Tricia. Ms. Picco, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. McHugh, actually going to piggyback after Mrs. Jacobson's question. If you could get us a number for in-district, out-of-district students who, I don't care what kind of literacy, specialized literacy they're getting, but we could see how big this program could expand the number of students in the district and out of district who, could benefit from some kind of structured literacy program.
Okay, I will definitely put something together, but that is going to go beyond the scope of this, because I believe everybody could benefit from structured literacy.
I know. I'm
But-
trying to think of like how to make a plan, say even for the next 5 years, to benefit the most students possible.
All right. So can you just for, so I make sure I'm responding appropriately to your request. Can you just state that
The
one more
number
time?
of students who in district or out of districts, and I know I'm being very broad, but get some kind of specialized literacy program.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm seeing no other questions on this. So we will move on to elementary social workers.
Sure. Hi again. This is Rob Mancusi, Executive Director of Special Education and Special Programs. In terms of speaking to the request for additional elementary social workers, this was a unanimous request from all the elementary principals in response to the growing social, emotional, and mental health needs of our elementary students. What this would allow, it would allow more time for social workers to spend with students and families, more time for social workers to consult with teachers, more time for social workers to work with colleagues, such as school psychologists, general ed class teachers, to enhance building-wide social emotional learning initiatives. And it really would also provide greater access, because social workers really are the best ones who have the knowledge of all that community mental health resources, as well as state agency resources that they could link parents or families up with. Challenged, as you've heard me say several times at this time, with students' social, emotional, mental health, and behavioral needs at this time. So that's the genesis of this request.
Questions? Ms. Guernsey?
So I'm not sure when the appropriate time is to have this conversation, but my concern is less about this program, which sounds important, but the idea that it's related to the reallocation of staff. So is that something we're discussing later, or do we do that now?
Mr. Cummings, are you, I think that we can address it now, being the two are related.
Okay. So I obviously need a lot more details on this, but I'm very uncomfortable and actually, frankly, really displeased and about the idea that we would be taking from our art program to make this work, unless I'm misunderstanding. That's something that is really difficult for me to swallow. And especially considering, obviously, the therapeutic benefits of art making and how they're fulfilling our current plans for the vision of the graduate, and along with it, a whole list of other important reasons why it's important to maintain art. And just pitting those two things together, I'm having difficulty trying to come to terms with that and understand it. So if someone could speak to that thought process, that would be helpful.
Who wants to take this?
All right, I'm sorry about that. I may have missed the beginning. I think I missed the beginning of your question, but based on what I just heard, I think the question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, the rationalization for moving forward with the additional social work at the same time we're reducing the art instructional time. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly that.
Okay. That was essentially a condition that as the administrators were building the budget. One of the things that we said I said as a guiding principle was that if they were talking about additions to the budget, additions to staffing, whatever it might entail, they had to also bring forward a corresponding reduction. Knowing going in what our budget expectations were going to be, knowing the constraints we were up against to start the year, all those types of issues.
Showing Christine. I'm trying to fix it, but I don't know.
Okay. Knowing that all those issues were confronting us, that's what I told the principals. So the elementary principals reviewed their current program, and that was what they brought forward, that bringing the art program back to a standardization of 40 minutes in each of the grade levels would provide the necessary FTE to support the addition of the social workers. It comes down to, financially we have to work within our means, and we can't do everything we'd like to do. And so that's essentially how we built this. We built this expectation, or that's how we bring forward this proposal.
So I'm not sure how to respond to that, other than this is something I'm really uncomfortable with. I think that I'm really actually surprised to hear that the building principals wouldn't find more value in our art program, or I'm not sure what kind of message that's sending. We moved from the 5-day to the 6-day rotation, and there was a large benefit in doing that, and it was just to bring together that extra 10 to 20 minutes to the upper grades in elementary art. So to take that away at a time when the arts are so needed to unify people and, bring messages of hope along all the other academic benefits and social benefits of it, I think it's a very, I think it's a big mistake. Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Ms. Jacobson.
Thanks. I didn't know if you could see me. Sorry, Christine.
Yep.
This is a follow-up to the same topic area. Fully, support the additional resources that are needed in the social worker counseling department always. However, I'm confused by the term additional staff, because these are being funded with existing resources. It's not new staff, it's reallocation, correct?
The reallocation of the from the art specifically to the social work. So the FTE.
I'm sorry.
We're getting an echo.
Who's picking that up? I'm going to try that again.
All right, well, on our document, I asked if the social worker line on page 82, I believe it was just changed from, you know, that line to the elementaries, and that answer was yes. So I think we just need greater clarification when we get to the 26th on how this FTE breaks down, because I know that's not tonight.
Yeah, I'm sorry, if we can do that, because at the same time we did that, we redistributed the FTE to the buildings, and we can cover that next Tuesday, as you say.
Yeah, so that would be helpful for the next time. So also, we approved the new art curriculum last April, less than a year ago. What was that new curriculum that we all approved, pre-K or K through 12? What amount of time was expected to deliver that curriculum?
It was expected under the current provisions of the 70 minutes in 4 and 5 and the 55 in 2 and 3.
In a curriculum that we just adopted less than a year ago, we're cutting the time to deliver it.
We're going to have to, yes.
Can you see why that would be difficult?
Well, yes, I can. The whole thing is difficult. I mean, nobody comes in to a budget looking to make cuts to a valuable program. But again, knowing the constraints we're under, knowing that, you know, the many other initiatives that our building and central office administrators brought forward today, or for this budget, that you're not even seeing because we had to make adjustments. These are the things that we have to operate under. And again, we knew coming in, given where we were last year with the budget, that we were going to start out, you know, from a negative. And so that's really when it's all said and done, the elementary principals have prioritized the social emotional needs of students with more social work support. I want to be clear, and I think Mr. Mancusi mentioned this. This is a need that's been exacerbated by the past year, but it was a need that existed even before that. And we've had previous conversations about how we were going to fund it, and we've never brought it forward because of the cost to the cost it added. So this is essentially how we feel we best can get what we think is needed for the students, but of course it comes at a cost to something else. It can't come from nothing, and that's the unfortunate part of this.
Okay, thank you for that rationale. I asked a question on the chart, what would be the cost to maintain at least the current level of services? And it wasn't answered on the chart. So for next time, or just in a follow-up, can I get that exact sum, please?
Ms. Jacobson, I just want to make that when you say current level of services, you mean the current instructional hours in art?
Correct.
Okay.
And I'll just follow up. To me, first of all, many of us on this call, and I'm sure in the audience who have been around for a long time or even recently, understand that when things go away, especially in elementary school, getting them back becomes a near impossibility. We see music gone after, we see art gone after, we see world language gone after. So it's not just about, this trade-off. It's also about the future. It's also about the vertical alignment going forward into middle school and into high school and into all of our art classes at high school that our kids take. So there's academic concerns for me as well. Not only also what Ms. Guernsey said about, to me, the arts are social emotional learning. Mm-hmm. So to cut one area of social learning, to supplant that with another area of social emotional learning. And I fully respect the principals need to, make tough decisions. I'm just not sure that this one, at least for me, aligns with everything else between what we just adopted, the vertical alignment, and just one of those areas that we know that kids that may not thrive necessarily in other areas, this is one of those areas that they can. So that will frame some of my decision-making going forward for this topic. Thank you so much.
Mike, can you on-screen share?
Yeah, I can do that. Hold on one second.
And Christina, I have a follow-up if you can't see my hand.
Thank Bonnie. Ms. Ortelli, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just want to agree with Ms. Guernsey and Ms. Jacobson. I totally understand the impact that this has had on our kids, and I can only imagine what we're going to see as consequences of the level of trauma they've had from not being in school. However, I don't understand at all the idea of cutting something like art, which promotes creativity and relaxation, something these kids desperately need. So it's not something that I would be supporting.
Mr. Peterson, followed by Mrs. Maxinelli.
Hi, thank you. I also want to echo those comments. I was surprised to see this cut. I agree that as far as the social emotional component, I don't know what would be better than the arts for some kids that have been impacted. I do want to make one clarification because we keep talking about financial resources, but really what we're talking about is minutes. We have a finite number of minutes in the day, and the way that we proportion out our curriculum, I think, is a choice that we're making. I see Mrs. Jacobson is shaking her head, but I'm not saying that there's not a financial cost. I'm saying that, like, we can't ignore that we can't just jam everything that we want in the day. I guess my question for Mr. Cummings is, in the elementary administrators' discussions, why was art favored over reductions to other programs?
Part of that discussion centered on the fact that there's those extra instructional minutes in grades 3 through 5. And, I think one of the things that we're looking at is, as you brought up, Mr. Peterson, one of our issues is balancing instructional minutes for all the curricular areas. I don't think it's an expression of the value they find in the art program at all. I think it's really trying to concentrate on what can be, if the base is 40 minutes and we're not cutting the 40 minutes, the students would still be getting the art program that they need, but the instructional minutes would then go to other curricular areas. Since the 60 minutes was added, those additional minutes were added to art. I think it was 5 years ago when I first started here. We've also added the STEAM program. So there's been additional impacts on the instructional day that have impacted our ability to meet the needs of students. And one of the things that we are concerned about and considering is, as we look forward to addressing academic needs that existed anyway, but may have been exacerbated by the past year, where will we find additional time during the day? So these are all questions that we're still wrestling with.
All right, thank you.
Mrs. Maxinelli?
Okay, and first I will apologize. I actually got knocked off of the meeting as we were segueing from the last topic to this one, so I missed all of Mr. Mancusi's discussion introducing this. So if I ask something that was answered, then I will apologize. It was not inattentiveness. I was not here. I'd just like to build on Mr. Peterson's point, and just to seek clarification from Mr. Cummings. Was this a decision of time in the day needed to be allocated to the social workers and had to be taken from something? Or was this purely a financial decision and they landed upon art as the place to find the money?
It really began with conversation about the financial decision. We don't expect necessarily that an additional 30 minutes of time in the 5th grades, for example, say taken from art, would go to in-class social work support, for example. It's not a trade-off of one for the other.
Okay, and because that was actually the key thing that I'd wanted to ask is, I don't understand the nature of this commitment. Is this a social worker who will now be addressing and working with a class of 15 to 25, or is this another body in the building to be pulling kids out of class to meet individual needs?
It's, we expect it to be both. There is a need for in-class supports, full class supports. You know, there's a lot of work we can do with students on mindset and those types of things. As you know, we've invested in that level of work. But I think there's also opportunities for lunch bunch groups and things like that, as well as individual counseling. The elementary principals have spoken for some time of the increased levels of anxiety and other traumas that our elementary kids are facing. And this really is every building principal, as was mentioned earlier, every building principal is seeing this need. It's not one or the other. It's not one, you know, select a few schools. Everybody does see this, and they do believe that students need more support, more time to develop coping skills, those types of things. So it would really be a combination of all of those things.
Okay. And because obviously all of us can see that art fulfills, a component of SEL work. And so I think that's what's part of what makes this choice a little bit inexplicable, is that while this might be a step forward from the social work point of view, it is a step backward elsewhere in our curriculum, which is unclear. But one thing I would hope to follow up on Mrs. Jacobson's point is as a question to you and your staff, if we could have input, I assume it would be through your art liaison, on exactly what would be the nature of the impact. When we cut for music, we knew, what instrumentation, or wasn't the recorder, but whatever it was that had to get cut when we played with music, what exactly would not be done in the art curriculum as a result of this, because we and they should know that. And I would also, just sensing the tenor of the board here, be curious if they can start, the elementary school administration can start thinking of now, is that obviously the board has the choice of either, if we fought for this, of either adding it back to the budget or insisting, give us another alternative. And so just proactively, could we have by the next meeting, what would be an alternative way to fund this? If your team could give us a choice, so we'd know, well, it could be this or it could be something else. Thank you. So that would be my question, query to you.
I think I can begin to answer that second question, because that was part of our conversation with the elementary team.
Okay.
And there's very little in the elementary program, beyond the core program. The other possibility that would be in place would be those things that have been added over time. So you're looking at things like elementary Spanish. You're looking at things like the STEAM program. You'd be looking at other additional pieces in the elementary program. Elementary, unlike, as you know this, elementary, unlike high school, you can't try to get 2 or 3 more kids into the social studies or the science classes, right? You can't compress FTE necessarily. So there's really not other things that can be done. The only kind of compression of those types of things would happen in other cuts to other programs. And that's really the conversations that we had. The feeling was that while the loss of instructional minutes in art was a concern, the students were still receiving art, and trying to find the appropriate balance of programs to support the different needs of kids. And that's really where they landed. I can certainly ask them again, but that was our conversation several weeks ago before the holidays when we were developing the budget.
Okay, so thank you for that. And again, I'll just leave it that I'd like to know what is the impact through that reduction of time. If we could either get that in an email, or better yet, probably said publicly at the next meeting. And again, I will say, in terms of what the social worker adds, that they are in the classroom doing more mind-up activities, to me is not a worthwhile trade-off. The Lunch Buddies program and those are things, that one-on-one work, that I understand better. The other I don't see as being an equal trade-off, but that's just my perspective. Thank you.
Ms. Jacobson?
Just Mr. Cummings, are you planning on maintaining the 6-day rotation next year?
Yes.
Okay, so this art would go, it used to be what, a 4 or 5 day rotation, correct?
It was a 5-day rotation, yes.
So they were getting art once a week, guaranteed. Now it's every 6 days. So it's already, so just to clarify, it's already been reduced. And this would be a second hit to that.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, if you think about a first grader 5-6 years ago went from art every 5 days to art every 6 days, yes.
So just to drive home the home, it's already seen a reduction in this area. So thank you.
Ms. Guernsey?
Just a quick question. I don't know if anyone could answer this now, but if not, maybe it's something that you could bring to our next meeting. If you could give me a better sense for if this new reduction would allow us to meet the suggested standards at the state and national level for the kind of curriculum we're providing for our elementary school students. Thank you.
Any other questions on this topic? Seeing none. And I'm just going to add, Mr. Cummings, just in terms of the reclaiming this time for other subject area, a little more clarification of where you see that, be it language arts or math. If any data being collected this year shows a need in any of those areas, I'd just be interested in knowing how that extra time is going to be utilized.
Sure.
And a little more detail to Ms. Massincanelli's point, just in terms of what the social emotional learning would look like for all students. Thank you for this presentation of this. So moving on to the next.
Okay, I believe the next enhancement is the stipends. So I'm going back to Mr. Mancusi. We had the PMT, the high school special ed, and the SRBI.
Okay, this is Rob Mancusi again, Executive Director of Special Ed and Special Programs. First, I will speak to the PMT, the trainer. As many of you are probably aware, we are required by the state to train crisis response teams in each building, as well as any other staff who may have a need to provide physical support to students in buildings in order to maintain student safety. Currently, I should have probably asked that this be considered previously to this. We currently have 2 staff members, 2 Tomlinson staff members who serve as district level PMT trainers. We provide, it's a 2-year cycle. We provide PMT training to approximately 200 staff members annually in refresher training and 30 to 40 staff members annually in, for new staff members who have not been certified or been trained previously. So our annual cost for PMT training would be approximately $17,000 if we had to contract for these services from an organization like PMT Associates in Middletown, which is probably the most widely used contracted provider for PMT training. We're looking to keep our 2 in-district trainers, compensate them with these stipends so that they don't leave. They are excellent in their job, and we would like to reward them for their hard work. Any questions on that?
No question? Okay, I don't see any questions. If I'm missing anybody, just speak up.
The next one is the high school special education department liaisons, which was recommended by the high school headmasters. This would be an existing teacher, special ed teacher at the high school level that would be a department liaison, would collaborate with other curriculum liaisons at the high school level, really on how to best meet the needs of students with disabilities across all settings, and particularly within general ed settings. We continue to look at how to improve quality of our instruction for students with disabilities at the high school level. And this would be a way to continue with that.
Mrs. Maxinelli?
All right, this was the question I submitted, but I couldn't find it very quickly, so I apologize for making someone do double duty, but I see Mr. Cavana is here on my screen. I don't know if Mr. Hatzis is here as well, but I have to admit, I didn't quite understand how this would be operationalized, because my first thought always is the best way to help a student with special needs is when that student's special ed monitor speaks with that student's teachers. And to do something at the macro big level, I don't see as being effective. And so I question how this actually would work. And that's what I'm looking to get some color to this, because special needs in the English department, I don't understand what would be happening with this that would be of academic value as compared with the students' team talking. So I don't understand what this coordination looks like.
Mrs. Maxinelli? So, nice.
I'm happy to take a stab at that question if you like.
Please, Mr. Cavana.
So the board was gracious enough to add stipend positions for department leaders in English, math, social studies, and science, put into place this year. And they're essential for both Greg and my leadership team, specifically around weekly meetings around improving instructional practices and dealing with the challenges this year, specifically with the change in instructional practices due to the pandemic. What we found was that not having a special ed counterpart at the table to be involved in this cross-pollination of one, discussion, and two, leading the departments instructionally was a disadvantage to what we could do instructionally across all disciplines with the assistance of the special ed department. So I welcome Mrs. Maxinelli's question. I think more of it is on a leadership school improvement team or a lens to improve instructional practices, for all students, and making sure special education has a seat at that table when those discussions are happening. So whether we're discussing tier 1 interventions, what a special education teacher, especially a leader within that department, has a whole separate lens of ideas that they can add to, the math, science, and social studies department liaison.
I didn't know if Mr. Hatzis was going to jump in as well, or.
I think Mr. Cavana did a great job explaining. The only thing I would add is that, at the high school, as you well know, we are very departmentalized. And so each department has a house principal that oversees, that department. And when we gather, now that we have the means to gather a leadership team, what it does is it unites the departments. It gives us a chance to talk about, you mentioned the macro level, but to be consistent across the macro levels ultimately would help with efficiency at the micro level. So having that voice at the table, it was one of the only departments left that did not have that leadership voice. World language and most of the elective areas have had liaisons for years, and we added the core areas last year. So special ed was one of the last departments to have an opportunity to have a voice, and gave us and would give us that perspective to keep in mind as we plan on a big level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the principals? Okay, thank you. Move on to SRBI.
Yep, and I would, since both Mr. Hatzis and Mr. Cavana, that will be impacting their buildings, they can also continue to speak to those positions.
So Paul, I guess I'll start on this one. Thank you very much for providing us the opportunity to talk about this. As you know, SRBI has been a a focus of our district for a number of years now. It's been part of the district improvement plan, and it has been part of all of our schools' school improvement process. One of the stumbling points that we have found is to have a dedicated person with all of the responsibilities that each of the administration has in terms of supervising staff, getting into classrooms, chairing PPT meetings, building budgets and all of that. Because this is a process that is important to be consistent across the district. What we felt we need is some leadership around that would focus primarily on this to serve as a liaison between the district, between schools and the administration of the schools, who could dedicate this time to ensure consistency, to advocate for resources as needed, and to help us develop a really consistent process so that we can maximize the supports that we give to the students who go through the process. That our initial hope, I'll be honest with you, was to actually devote a full-time FTE to a position such as this, on top of maybe helping us incorporate social emotional learning practices and skill building at the high school level. As Mr. Cummings expressed earlier, knowing that there are difficulties in building budgets and setting priorities in terms of scarce resources in terms of asking for increases. We are glad to have been given the opportunity to even start to build a position through a stipend that would be able to get somebody dedicated to this.
The other point that, if I just make briefly, is that all these positions are teacher level, which is good because it gives the opportunity to build teacher leadership capacity at that level. So we almost have think of it as a farm team. So we don't lose our most gifted and talented educators to other districts where they do offer teacher leadership positions. So I would just ask the board to keep that in consideration, because we have very talented staff members that get the opportunity to still be in the classroom and do what they love, but also get to build their leadership capacity, support the school and support the system. In addition, this position can specifically be targeted at looking at ways to improve or to lessen the opportunity gap, specifically in reading and mathematics.
Thank you, Mr. Gavan and Mr. Hatzis. Mrs. Max Kennelly?
Just one quick question, and thank you, because I previously had been dubious about this, and both of you spoke to that in a way that was very compelling, so thank you. My one question is since we've also been very strong defenders of our house system, how do you see a single stipend position in a high school like this? How do you see that working? Because otherwise I would have naturally seen this falling to the students' individual guidance counselors, to your house deans. So in our house system, how do you see this single stipend position working?
It's a great question. What we've had to do to try to kind of do a division of labor is we've had each of the house principals and the director of people services take different portions. At least the approach that we've used at Ludlow is we've taken different portions of the SRBI process. For instance, the house principal who oversees the math department works on SRBI issues for students who have primarily math issues. Director of people services is working on the behavioral, social, emotional piece. Our house principal who oversees English has been working with students with literacy issues. But as you know, there are many students who might have issues across many of those areas. So we've created a division of labor to help maximize meeting time and to be able to move as many students through the process as we possibly can. But it's been very difficult. It's been probably a bit more fractured than we would hope it to be. And what we hope that this person could do is serve as a leader to unify the processes across each of those areas, and also work with his or her counterpart across town at Ward, so that we are being consistent across the schools in terms of the different mechanisms we can use to support students. If one school has a good idea, we want the other school to be aware of it and, accessing, the same types of resources and utilizing. So it's somebody who can dedicate their time to just focusing on it. It's not, I'll be honest with you, it's a start. It's not gonna, it may not solve our problem in terms of creating a robust SRBI program, but it will get us steps closer.
Just one quick point. Ms. Maxon Kennelly is being relatively new to Fairfield and first time being involved in the house system. I see how special it is and how so much ingrained in our, in our culture and really how it serves our students. So we would never want to take away from that. The one point that I would add to Mr. Hatzis's point is this would be another person at our leadership table with a specific lens around intervention. So when those discussions are happening, when we're working on our school improvement team, when we're, looking at planning professional learning, that you have one designated person that focuses that lens specifically on, interventions to help support our students.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to both Mr. Hatzis and Mr. Cavanagh's remarks and kind of build off a couple points that were said. One is that an additional function of this role would be to coordinate and the transition for SRBI programs from the middle school. We would really, for the first time, create last year the board supported the creation of SRBI coordinators in each of them 3 middle schools. It would really allow for the first time a pre-K-12 SRBI transition system to supplement for regular education students who need additional supports. And as Mr. Hatzis and Mr. Kavanagh both said, I would let the board know that certainly this is the beginning of additional SRBI supports at the high school. We want to not only expand this position eventually to really handle most of the SRBI responsibilities in the school, but we see a need to look at some of the ways that we currently structure classes and class supports in order to support the needs of all learners too. So there's a lot of work to be done in supporting SRBI at all of our levels. And I want to thank Mr. Hatzis and Mr. Kavanagh because both of them are taking leadership around thinking differently about how this will work in a comprehensive, large high school.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you again, Mr. Kavanagh, Mr. Hatzis. Teacher Residency Program.
Ms. Deasy, speak to this.
Good evening. I'm Colleen Deasy. I am the Executive Director of Personnel and Legal Services. I will speak to the Teacher Residency Program that we have budgeted for next year. We would be partnering with CREC, which is the Capital Region Education Council. Thank you, Rob. Which would provide an alternate route to certification for 2 people who are interested in becoming teachers. And our hope is that both of these people, who we will call residents, would be teachers of color. So the teacher residency program minimizes barriers to traditional certification programs. They don't have to apply to be admitted to that program. If they're selected by us and by CREC to do the program, they would automatically be in the course and the certification program. The commitment for us in terms of a budget is a 1-year commitment. The residents are going to participate in the courses for 18 months. So they start over the summer and they finish, the courses continue to support the residents in their 2nd year of the program, at which point we would have committed to giving them a 1.0 FTE teaching position here in Fairfield. So the residents work for the first school year with a mentor teacher. They receive pay and benefits in this position. And they're, like I said, they are guaranteed a full-time teaching position upon completion of the program and certification requirements. The budgeted line for this is for 2 residents during the 21-22 school year. They work with a mentor teacher for the year, so the budget also considers a stipend for 2 mentor teachers. And in creating this line item, we initially budgeted for the full $65,000 per resident that is recommended by CREC. However, we have committed that one of the salaries will be paid out of existing paraprofessional or ed trainer FTE. It's possible that both could be, but we did want to leave some room in the budget for the possibility that someone might not fit naturally into one of those existing positions. And we just wanted to err on the side of caution for that. And if someone is going to take a paraprofessional or ed trainer FTE, then that would be a savings for us. And we have committed to providing full-time teaching positions to both residents upon completion of the 21-22 school year and the residents' completion of their certification requirements. So the cost breaks down to include a partnership fee to CREC, that's $10,750, mentor stipend to 2 mentors for $6,000, and we would also pay for the materials costs for the residents. And that it also includes their annual salary, benefits package, and a summer stipend. So the entire program is provided at no cost to the residents.
Questions for Ms. Deasy? Ms. Jacobson?
Hi. Thank you to everyone who answered questions on our sheets on this. I know there was a lot of interest and curiosity about how it all would break down, so thank you for that. 2 quick questions for you. The payment to CREC, what is that for?
That's essentially for the coursework.
Oh, it's for the courses. Okay, all right. And is there any particular certification area that they seek in this program, or is it up to the district based on what we need? Is it up to the individuals and they're interested in pursuing? Like, are they? So just go ahead.
Sure. So CREC primarily is looking for elementary teachers. However, they are flexible on the certification, especially for something like special education, where it's fairly straightforward to get a cross endorsement from the state certification office.
Okay, so what you're thinking though is that this would be for elementary for us in terms of those offers of FTE?
It would be for elementary or special education. I know Mr. Mancusi and I have begun to engage in some recruitment efforts for people to apply for this, and the people we've spoken to so far are interested in being special educators.
Okay. All right, thank you. I just one last question. I know that we are committed to, offering them an FTE at the end of their training and upon certification. But can you just speak to, is that a requirement that once we support this program in this way, is there a requirement that they stay with us other than going to another district after the program ends?
That's a good question. Mike's nodding. Do you know the answer, Mr. Cummings?
I'm nodding because I agree. I think that's a good question. I don't know the answer offhand to that.
Okay.
I think it would be important for us to just understand what that commitment is, what the mutual commitment is. Just if we can find that out for next week or something as a follow-up. Thanks so much. But super excited for this. I just want to understand the details a little bit more. Thank you.
Mrs. Maxinelli?
Just very briefly, I wanted to follow up on Mrs. Jacobson's point. I think this is a great idea, but I absolutely believe that with a financial investment in our part, there has to be a guaranteed follow-up minimum requirement of service where the money is due. That is in place in other districts. I don't think it's asking too much. I would be interested in knowing for sure that this is going to happen to the benefit of the district.
Absolutely agree. That if we're going to make the investment, we want to, reap the benefits of having these teachers stay with us. Any other questions for Ms. Deasy about this? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Deasy. Moving on to indoor air quality and preventative maintenance programs.
Okay, Mr. Papa George.
So this enhancement that we've put in there is to increase the indoor air quality within the buildings. A couple things one thing we've already started is the MERV 8 filters to MERV 13 filters where available.
We're also looking to improve our PM programs within the HVAC systems, such as we are going to implement the bids so that when we do preventative maintenance on our rooftop units and air handler units, it will include the entire district and not hand-chosen units throughout the district. We've also improved some of our control systems with these units to make them more energy efficient and to operate more efficient with newer equipment and newer computerized systems. With that comes some improved preventative maintenance, computer side, to improve, to make sure that we're getting the enhancements that we've anticipated with the computerized upgraded control systems. We're also working on some other preventative maintenance programs as well, such as our plumbing and HVAC. Our plumbing, so that we can look at and anticipate areas where we may have problems that we can get a handle on and get improvements with before they become issues within the buildings. So one of those issues would be the steam lines at, for instance, Ludlow High School, where we've had some pinholes throughout the units and we've been replacing pipe work. There's ways we can go through and do smoke tests on these systems to ensure that we are not having behind the wall issues that we are unaware of. So those are some of the preventative maintenance that we're looking to move forwards into in the future.
Any questions for Mr. Papa George? Okay. Seeing none, I think there were some questions on the Q&A document. Thank you for answering those, Mr. Papa George.
Oh, sorry.
All right, before we move on to the executive summary, any last questions on enhancements? Okay. Moving on to executive summary, pages 22 to 25. Any questions on the budget drivers and just really the non-lapsing account and the budget hole? Ms. Jacobson, is your hand up?
Oh, no, sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay.
Not on that item.
All right. All right. No questions. We'll move on to instructional services, pages 30 to 31. Any questions? Okay, seeing none. Moving on to tuition, pages 34 to 35. Ms.
Sorry.
Ms. Jacobson?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Just try to coordinate the charts, you know. Mr. Mancusi, are you there? Okay. So I had asked a question on tuition and you didn't seem to quite understand what my question was. So I'm sorry about that if it wasn't clear on my chart. And it was about what the tuition line is right now for this year. Sorry. Is for this year, that is, you know, it's a significant increase from what was budgeted. And I was just curious how, if it was that, if it's this much for this year, why would we not expect for that increase to carry over to next year? Like, are we expecting some of those kids to come back? You know,
There is a story.
Okay, go ahead.
There is a story behind this number. I'm going to ask Ms. Munsell to assist if I'm not clarifying myself. The number you see in the tuitions, what page is that?
My question pertains to page, you know, the supporting detail, which is on page 82.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just getting myself organized so I can answer this question.
Yeah.
All right. the numbers tell a different story because the numbers projected for next year are post-COVID projections. So we are projecting difference in excess cost reimbursement from what we're projecting this year of nearly $1 million. It's $986,212 more in excess cost reimbursement we're projecting next year than this year. This year, also from the budgeted amount, we're projecting at this time that we're receiving $410,219 less in what we budgeted for this year in excess cost reimbursement. And that's primarily due to the learning models of some of our students with disabilities. They don't qualify for excess cost reimbursement, either because they've been learning remotely or they have, they're on a hybrid plan. Transportation is not being utilized nearly as frequently. And in many cases, students who have one-to-one supports, if they're not in school, they're not getting them. So that cost is causing that number to look more inflated than usual. We do have $367,787 in our projection for next year. That is due to the change in laws. Students now are eligible for special education until their 22nd birthday if they have not received their high school diploma yet. And then we also, that number this year is inflated because we have over $200,000 and I think it was $214,000 in carryover settlement agreements that we were unable to close out due to the closure in the spring.
So that's all included in the tuition line?
That all is included in that $700,000 this year. And then in the $580,958 tuition line projected for next year is really the $1 million difference in excess cost reimbursement.
Okay, so just simplifying this really simple. We're at 7.4 this year. This budget calls for 5.58. I just want to make sure that we're not under budgeting this line item based on this year's experience and that, there isn't an anticipated carryover to next year with these same students. That's all I'm trying to get at for this right now.
I will tell you, your question had me thinking and digging all day to make sure I could tell a story. We will revisit this next week. That's why I asked that question. But yes, we do have many students who are graduating this year, and we do have some settlements that are ending this year because of graduation. And although we have,
but going back to just to piggyback back on another area here, we're having a significant pre-K eligibility issue, that are increasing significantly. So, from one end to the next, it's increasing. So this is almost a $2 million reduction in this line item. So we need to be really careful.
you know what? We will have additional information next week to share.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much. And I think the other piece was about revenue, but that's not tonight. So we'll talk about that next time. Thank you so much for that.
We did answer that revenue question in the questions. If that is not specific enough, we'd be happy to provide more information.
No, that was specific. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on tuition? Okay, seeing none, moving on to other purchased services, pages 36 to 37. Any questions? Seeing none.
Christine?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I just want to say that in going between the book and the spreadsheet on a screen, which is even harder than doing it when it's on hard copy paper, it is okay if we ask follow-up questions next week if we can't get to it yet.
Absolutely. And, we will start the next meeting with just any follow-up from this meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, just in case, you know, something else comes up, or I know that we got the Q&A document just later in the afternoon today. Not everyone might have had a chance to review it, so if there's any follow-up on that, we can do that at the beginning of the next meeting. All right, so supplies, texts, and materials. Yep.
I had a question on number 7.
Oh, okay. Mr. Peterson, floor's yours.
I also want to echo something that Ms. Canelli said. I'm having difficulty flipping back and forth between this, especially since we only got a half an hour before the meeting, so or for our earlier meeting. So I may have some questions. I did want to ask if we're also going into the detail material. Specifically about why some buildings were seeing copier budget increases, and the answer that I received from Dr. Zavenchik was that it's based on click charges accurately reflect usage. Why don't we instruct schools to copy less? I mean, is there a control on that? I can't.
Mr. Peterson, could you just repeat that? We had a hard time hearing you here in central office.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah, I just wanted to ask why, if we're basing budget numbers for copying off of actual usage, why aren't we trying to copy less?
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I think we put it in the answers. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Monsell, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Doreen Monsell, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services. We previously had done the budget based on per pupil allocation, and I switched it to the actual lease cost plus historical click charges. So now we should be able to have a better picture of what actual usage is. Whereas before we didn't necessarily have that.
I appreciate why is any facility being allowed to copy more? I guess why these seem like small numbers, but it seems like of anything that we should be getting lower numbers of, it should be paper copies.
I think in the future that was the intention of making the change in the way it was budgeted, so that we could track actual usage in the future. We haven't been able to do that. It's been more of a spreading the wealth.
I'm not sure I know what that means, but we're budgeting $12,000 in increased copier expenses this year, and I have a difficult time swallowing that. Thanks.
No, it's only 2,000.
No, if you go through all the individual schools, I added them all up line by line. It's $11,905.
If you go to page 88.
Doreen, you have to talk up a little bit louder.
If you go to page 88, at the towards the bottom of the page.
I understand. I think if I understand correctly what you're saying the net is plus $2,000. What I'm saying is that there's $12 worth of copies that schools are increasing over their prior year budget.
Well,
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I know it's a small thing. I can't, it's difficult for me to understand why in 2021 we're increasing copier expenses at a host of schools. That's where I am with that line.
Okay.
I want to, if you guys can mute. Mr. Pearson, Mike Cummings, I appreciate the question. You guys gotta mute. I think we're gonna have to look at this further. You know, one, obviously there's a financial consideration here that has to be addressed, but what I hear you saying, I apologize if I'm hearing you wrong. It raises issues around instruction. It raises issues around the use of resources. I think of people standing in front of copiers. So I think it's going to require more time for us to kind of dig underneath, look under the hood of this to see what's going on and what's driving it.
I appreciate that. I'm sorry to spend so much time on this. It's just it's a thing that's bothered me for all 4 years I've been on the board.
No, I appreciate you bringing it up. As somebody whose office used to be around the corner from the copier center and would stumble over the boxes every summer, I understand your concerns. I think there's a dependency on paper that we have to begin to free ourselves of.
Okay, any other questions on this? Okay, supplies, text materials.
What else we computer?
38, 39. I'm seeing none. Moving on to capital, pages 42 to 43.
Now we can't hear them at all.
Somebody's got to put their volume up.
Yeah, I had it on, but it was backdated from someone else.
Going once, going twice, capital. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you. I'm trying to get a minute here to get where I am on the sheet. Is this from about the individual projects, such as the Ludlow parking lot?
This is capital outlay, not maintenance projects.
I'm sorry. Hold on just a minute.
Okay.
Mike, as long as you guys mute yourself.
Right, I'm gonna hold my question since I'm lost in the sheet.
Christine.
Yeah.
Nick.
Yes, Nick.
Is this the section here? I believe here. I had a question there. I looked briefly. There were some answers that I saw filled into the sheet, and I have not gotten a chance to look at what Mike sent us. But I know Jeff, I believe, had asked a question about the info management software and the licensing, and the Google Enterprise fees and everything in here. And I was just, there was a part that struck out to me as well. I understood this now, but my initial gut was, okay, when COVID's over, or whatever we call it, we're back full time and we're not as reliant on this. For the public, can you just explain why that number is, over $100,000? Because at first glance for me, it looked like, okay, well, we won't be needing to rely on these virtual meets and everything.
I'll take that question. Zakia Parrish, Executive Director of Operations and Processes. So the 125 is not solely for Google Enterprise. Google Enterprise is a part of that. And so the Google Enterprise is not just for online meetings. It's inclusive of Google Classroom and all the other capabilities that come with it. So there were many teachers on the secondary level who were already using Google Classroom pre-COVID. This allows them to continue to do so with all of the enhanced features that go into the Google Enterprise account. Additionally, I think if we are looking to reduce our footprint in terms of paper copies. We need to make sure that we have the ability to allow teachers to be able to upload documents electronically so that students can continue to access it. So the Google Enterprise cost is actually only 48,000 of that 125,000 increase. The other parts of that is the security camera software upgrades that need to occur, in addition to some, and this is in the response that was provided, in addition to some of the Khajiit hotspots, there was some changing in the pricing that was we were paying in previous years in comparison to next year's quote. So there is an increase in pricing for that, as well as some increase in security software, such as our antivirus software.
And this may be a stupid question, but does some of this go out to bid, or is there only one provider for some of this stuff that you just mentioned, in addition to the Google?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. I understand that Google is through them, but does any of the other items you mentioned go out to bid? Like software and, oh boy.
So I do not think that the software goes out to bid. Typically, you are identifying the software that meets the needs of your particular organization. I do believe that Nancy Burns is on here that can talk more specifically about whether or not that goes out to bid. But in my experience, it is not something that we've traditionally gone out to bid to get, I guess, additional competitive quotes on. You typically will find the software that suits your needs and identify, if there are other competitors, but typically it's not a bidding situation, but she can certainly provide more clarity on that.
Okay, and my last question in this section is, I noticed, I believe it was replacement of, 50 printers and 45 projectors or maintenance on those. And I'm just curious, are these something that we're owning, leasing, splitting up half and half? What are we, my question is are we going about it in the most cost-effective way? And do we need to replace all of these items? I know it sounds like a small thing, but you add up, 50 of them and it becomes a bigger number.
Yes, so I think you might be referring to the replacement bulbs for the projectors. So the projectors are things that are currently installed in many classrooms across the districts. We are moving towards the interactive displays, which do not require the bulb, but that's a part of a different investment that has to occur. So until we're able to get to a point where every classroom that needs it has an interactive display as opposed to a projector, we will have to continue to replace projector bulbs. The cost varies depending on the manufacturer, and unfortunately, over the last few years, manufacturers have changed, and so it has resulted in a variety in terms of the cost of the bulbs. And I'm trying to look here. On average, we replace anywhere between 100 and 132 bulbs. It really just depends on the length of the use. And of course, in times where we're using projectors a lot more often, it does require us to replace the bulbs a lot more often.
Okay, sorry. I thought I saw replacing the projectors themselves. So.
Ms. Burns, do you have anything to add?
Well, I can add several things. As far as the software is concerned, we have bid out software previously. We also always go under either a consortium or a state contract if we're not, when it exceeds the bid allowance, which is $15,000. So the majority of what we purchase is more expensive than that. The finance board and the charter allows us to do. So the pricing is competitive. I work with a number of different vendors, and those vendors, when I say a number of them, vary depending on what the software solution is that we're pursuing. For example, in the software for the security cameras, we've actually gone through 3 different companies in trying to negotiate pricing, but also we've done what I'll call beta testing with them, where we gave them a small project and allowed them to try to show us what they could actually accomplish. and whether we were, and then we evaluated whether we were happy with them or not before we even went with the bid. So, or I should say the consortium agreement that they had in place. So we do a lot of due diligence with what we work with. As for the projectors, I had to keep in mind that we've got roughly 900 classrooms across the district. So anytime we do anything, it's a big deal because there's just so many rooms. Teachers are highly dependent with the multimedia tools that they use in instruction, even when we're in a non-COVID environment, where they're using their projectors and their interactive boards. We started installing projectors across the district, I think it was back in, well, on a regular basis, 08 and 09. And then we completed projectors in every classroom, I think about 10, maybe 12 years ago. We're at the point where things are aging out more so than they had been. We've really gotten a lot of time out of some of those projectors. So as Dr. Parrish was alluding to, what we're trying to do is replace them with interactive boards in those locations that need that interactivity. They do a lot more than the traditional smart board did back in its day. But we also have some classrooms where they don't really need that kind of interactive board. So we're just maintaining the projection systems for what they need to accomplish. I hope that helps.
Any other questions, Mr. Asa?
No, all good, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else for capital? Okay. Seeing none, just as we move forward, we're going to keep on using the Google Doc. Ms. Jacobson?
Sorry, did you do contracted services already?
I'm sorry, I don't have that on my, we said we would add that. I don't have it on my agenda.
Okay, sorry, Christine.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Ms. Jacobson, for reminding me. I assume you have a question?
I do.
Floor is yours, dear.
This is for Mr. Papa George. Is he still on?
Ms. Jacobson,
Oh, yeah, I see you.
While he's getting on, could you place a page?
Oh, sure. Sure, Jen. You can look at page 33, which is the summary, and the details guys are from 77 to 79. It wasn't on the agenda, but it was supposed to be. It's in the front of our book for tonight, so just we had checked that it would be on. So Christine told us that it would be on today.
And we can cover it next week also.
Yeah. So my question is on the AC consultant. I know I asked this question on the chart, and it seems like we sent over our request into purchasing. Can you just remind us all when that went over to the town?
So it went over to the town just before the holiday break. I actually did receive word at the end of last week that it was delayed shortly because of someone in purchasing department was out sick for quite some time, but they have returned at this point, so they're playing catch up at this point, but we are staying on them and we are trying to move it forwards as quickly as we can.
They didn't give you any type of a deadline?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
They didn't give you any type of an estimate time when this RFP will be?
They did not. I will follow up with them again first thing in the morning.
Okay. All right, because I just wanted, my question really was just did we expend this year's 100K and just where that for this very large project that we all know is necessary. So just looking to see that for to make sure that there would be enough for next year. So that was just my question on that piece. Thank you, Christine.
Sure. Any other questions on this? Mr. Peterson?
A couple, if we are with Ms. DC, the in the materials you provided, as far as the it's listed in the budget objects, 5 line 68 legal services. The budget has a $3,000 increase. Am I correct in what you said, that that is an error, that there is a 0 increase this year?
That is correct. It should have been a zero increase, and it was put in as $30,000 increase. So hopefully that is the first cut that the board will decide to make together.
All right. You don't feel
weeks.
you need the extra $30,000. That's not an earlier draft that just made it in. It's
just an error. We meant to hold flat for the year.
okay. And I see Mr. Cummings put in a long explanation about the I wondered if you wanted to speak to that with this. Again, I understand why this would be of value. I'm curious why it's of value right now. Oh, I think he got cut off.
Okay. You're off, right? Okay. Yeah, we're coordinating our volumes here together. To our thinking, the value now is as we begin to develop a new district improvement plan, part of what we know is going to be an issue going forward is improving internal and external communications. So having a good understanding of what we do well, what we need to improve, not only will benefit the development and delivery of that district improvement plan, but I think in itself can become one of the major components of that district improvement plan. We have need to train our staff across the district in best communication methods. We have gaps in our ability to, in a sense, sell the good work of the district. I've been collecting samples from our neighbors of their grade level brochures, their curriculum brochures, their communications they have with area newspapers, even trumpeting the success of their graduates. There's a lot of things that I don't think we do well. I think there's a lot of things we do well, and I think one of the things we don't do well is communicate those things. But I also think that at the source of so much issues in the district is the lack of communication or poor communication, and strengthening that across the district really is a priority.
I guess my follow-up question to that would be, hasn't that something that's been helped by the addition of a communication director?
Oh, I think it definitely has, and particularly in light of what we've been going through this year, I think that's been incredibly supportive of a need filled in the district. But I think expanding that work so that it really, I think, Mr. Pearson, one of the ways I look at it in a sense is, how does it become a way of life for all of us? That having a coordinator of this, having somebody who can essentially get into the publishing of materials and all is very necessary. But I also think that that all of us bear a responsibility to be better communicators and to think about communication when decisions are being made. I think it's going to lead to a stronger organization.
All right, thank you. I may have more follow-up questions for this, but I'll save that for now.
Sure, thank you.
Any other questions? And as I said, we could address this again next week, being that it wasn't on the agenda, but in the budget book. All right, seeing no other questions. Mr. Cummings, I don't know if you have any closing remarks or anything you want to share before we head into next week. Mr. Tello, do you have your hand up, Bonnie? Go ahead.
Hi. My computer would not unmute. Sorry. Yeah, I'm a little off tonight only because I didn't get the answers to the questions until right like 10 minutes before our 6:30 meeting. And so I didn't get to see all the answers or read through all that. There was so much. So I was just wondering that if before our next meeting, we could have printouts available to pick up at central office. I don't know, by like 4 o'clock the night before, before the meeting, so we have some time to go over it. Because I need the hard copies. I can't look at it on my phone while I'm on the computer for the meeting. So, just wondering.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tully. I think I'm gonna ask everybody to try to remember this, but I think next year it would be helpful not to plan the first budget meeting after a 3-day weekend, for one thing, because it gave us little time in the central office to kind of put the answers together. Of course, this is all compounded by everything else that's going on in the district today. I think that certainly impacted, and we apologize. I will tell you, we worked all day on the answers. If we can ask that all the questions be in by next Sunday night, we can spend Monday next week to getting the answers together for those questions, and then we can get that out to everybody ahead of time. And if people want paper copies, we can get those to you as well. So if the board submits all the questions by Sunday night, our goal would be to get everything completed by late Monday afternoon, and then distribute either late Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we already said we have, you gave us some additional questions to answer tonight. And as Ms. Vitale said, we can start next week's meeting reviewing those, as well as any questions that we didn't get to this evening before we get into next week's questions.
Ms. Pickup?
Mr. Cummings, the other board members may feel differently. Maybe we just need to change the way that we do this altogether, because myself, I spend the weekend going through the budget book because I've already committed to so many other Board of Ed liaison meetings that I have to attend to. So maybe the budget meetings need to be on Thursday or something. I'm not sure, but it's a lot in January for all of us to go through, to find the questions. And then even after you've answered the questions, I have more questions.
Yeah, well, it's a conversation for another time, but we are working within the timeline. And, we're praying that it isn't going to snow and ruin us, wash us out one night or snow us out one night. So I'm open to further, conversations next year if we want to adjust the calendar a bit. Absolutely.
Mr. Cummings, do you foresee if board members get questions in earlier, that answers being put into the document earlier before next week?
We can. I will tell you that we have a couple of other sessions scheduled together this week. I think part of that depends on our ability to keep other obstacles out of our path, as it were. And I know that depending on each individual's schedule, they start to work on those outside of those meetings as well. I will tell you that I got notifications anytime anybody touched the document this weekend, and a number of board members had very impressive counts on their emails, but Mr. Mancusi probably beat you all. He spent the entire weekend, I think, on that document. So we will work on them. We don't wait for those moments when we're together. We work on them continually, and then we bring them back and we read them to each other and we check. So it's a continual editing process. We can certainly do that.
This is Max Kennelly.
I'm just wondering, because obviously I've shared with Mrs. Vitale my opinion of this Google spreadsheet and how it was organized, but that point is moot now. What I just want to make sure is that I don't miss anything. So would it make sense that everything that was answered as of this event get, that light shading of blue, so it's very distinct what are new questions, so that I don't miss, that somebody's added something and it's a new answer? Because especially if you end up doing the answer more gradually, what's been covered. I don't know. I just, like, if this is a point of demarcation, it would seem like somehow the questions should indicate that.
Yeah, we can color code them like that, sure.
Because I'm assuming that if we have follow-up questions on what was already covered today, we should put that on the appropriate page, correct?
You should put it on the appropriate page, and then by dating it, we know where to start.
That's true. I forgot that it had the date column. Thank you.
I did leave on there, and I'll double check it. I'll make sure if it's not there, that light blue shading to kind of let people know where we left off, and then go below that. And that helps all of us.
Okay. Ms. Jacobson?
Just a really quick question. The documents that we have, the Q&A and the backup, the attachments, Mr. Cummings, will those be posted on our budget page? If they're not already, I haven't looked recently, just for public purposes, or when will we do that?
Ms. Jacobson, I believe Ms. Brown posted them tonight before she went home.
Oh, okay. And the attachments as well?
Yes.
Okay. And then unless Mr. Peterson's going to be very disturbed, I would like to echo possibly a paper copy Monday night or Tuesday of both of these. And I am green, but it's a lot to look at.
He's going to put a coin jar.
So, Mr. Peters, I'm happy to make a contribution if it would make you feel better. So, yeah.
Thanks. Can I ask a question before we do this? Because I just, before you leave, and at the risk of further alienating Mr. Peterson, I find that the large 8.5 by 17 really works well. Would this be what the board would like?
Let's just over the edge and go big. Go big paper.
No, big paper.
Kilowatts and photocopies.
Can I just say?
Sorry,
Mike, I think just have Meg poll the individual board members, because some of us actually do everything digitally. So there are a couple of us, so that might not need the paper.
Thank you, Mr. Asa. Really, if anybody wants paper, please just shoot Meg an email and let her know. All right, any last comments? Questions? Thank you all for Mrs. Gerber. Was it?
Yeah. Thanks. Sorry, I haven't spoken much because I've got a really bad headache, but I just did want to say thank you to Mr. Cummings and all of the administrators for the incredible amount of answers that you provided us. And while I absolutely agree that it's always good to be able to get this information in advance so that we can read it before the meeting, I mean, this is my 10th budget season, I think. We have gotten answers at the table many, many years. So I just want to make it clear, not so much to the people participating in this meeting, but if anyone's listening from the public thinking that somehow this is something different and we've always gotten things way in advance, that many years we have gotten, if not all of the answers, many of the answers at the table, in part because a lot of us submit our questions on the later side. And I think especially with the long weekend, which we always have in January because it's always here. Just wanted to put that out there because I mean, it is a lot and I've been frantically trying to go through and it's hard to follow things, especially when you're looking on the laptop. But I mean, we did get a lot of information. We did ask a lot of questions. We've gotten a lot of answers back. And, I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Pickup?
I was just thinking today that this was my 6th budget. And the part that I want to add is the detail of our budget book has so improved since when I first started. And still, I find myself going back through different sections and we add more every year. So if this is their first year looking at it, I mean, we've come a long way. And I know we've gotten like awards from CABE for our budget book.
That's correct. Ms. Munsell's group, they do a great job.
So I echo that. Thank you, Ms. Munsell, Mr. Cummings. Thank you all for all the work that you have done on this budget and for your thorough responses to our questions. I think the fact that we had a 6:30 meeting prior to this also kind of took away some of our review time. But I agree, we have gotten at the table. So I appreciate having this Q&A available. Something else for us to look forward to reviewing over the next week as we finish up the budget. One other thing for the next meeting, I want to try to add in a little time for public comment. I've gotten a couple of questions just in terms of giving the opportunity for the public to weigh in and share their thoughts prior to our vote on Thursday, the 28th. So I'm going to work that in, preferably at the beginning of the meeting. Maybe I will poll you to see, maybe we'll start at 7 instead of 7:30. Would that work? Just think about it. I'll poll you just for availability so we can just add in some extra time for public comment. After public comment, we'll start the meeting with just a review for any of the Q&A, any last minute questions follow-up from this meeting, and then we'll get into the rest of the budget. Okay? Thank you all again, and have a good night. With that, a motion to adjourn. Mr. Peterson, seconded by Mr. Atteli, all in favor. Motion carries 9-0.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.